If all of the TPC members would come and take your seats, please. Would all of the TPC members please come and take your seats?
Yes, sir. I'm going to behave every day.
Everyone would please come and take your seats. We've got a full agenda and we need to get started. So I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Transition Planning Commission. And if we could, as we always begin our meetings, have a moment of silence and so that we can ask for discernment and wisdom in making the decisions that we have to make. So if we could do that now. Thank you. Talking about a moment of silence, okay, all of you have a envelope in front of you, and this is a special note to all of you. There has been not just one young lady, but a number of people in the community that has actually been praying for us daily, and she asked if she could bring a personal note to us at this meeting, and so I told her this is a public meeting and she can do whatever she wishes to do, so she brought the note, and I just wanted to let you know that where that had come from. You have the minutes before you and have an opportunity to read them. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mayor Keith McDonald. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor.
Sorry. And it's been seconded by Ms. Stanton. Now, are there any additions, corrections, deletions from the minutes? Having no comments, all in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it and the minutes have been approved. We're trying to get to the meat of our meeting because, as we know, this is our long-awaited session for visioning. But I would like to call on the chairs of the Communication and Community Engagement Committee to just briefly talk about the process that they will be going through to engage local consultation for some of the community engagement activities.
Madam Chairman, the Community Engagement Communication Committee has been meeting. We have developed a draft of an RFQ. We have been receiving names of PR firms and who potentially could assist us in the messaging and public relations efforts for the Commission. We will be sending, that has been given to the committee and to the staff of who are assisting the committee. We will make a final review of that RFQ, and we will be sending it out to the names of the organizations and entities that have been given to us. When we receive the replies, the two co-chairs will review those and then submit recommendations to the committee, which will review the recommendations, and then based upon the recommendations from the committee back to the co-chairs, we will make a decision and present that to the Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Boyd, as you all remember, last week we did approve a budget, and there was a line item for that particular engagement. So thank you very much. I apologize to the audience tonight for having my back to you. That's not normal, but we're glad to have everyone here. And I just want to start out by, again, thanking all of you for the tremendous amount of work you've done since October. This will be our last full meeting of the year, and it's a full agenda. But I just really want you to know how much I appreciate it, and wish all of you very happy holiday and Merry Christmas. I'm going to start by just introducing Jay Puckett from the Boston Consulting Group. I know each of you has been interviewed by one of the individuals from the group prior to this evening, but you may not have met all of them. So I'm going to call on Jay, who is the principal, I guess you would say. You're the head man, right, Jay?
Right, I'm the senior partner.
There you go,
Right.
senior partner. I like that. So I'm going to call on you to introduce his team, and then they will be basically in charge of this agenda until the closing. So, Jay, if you would.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and we've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had with each one of you, and all of us look forward to working with you through this important process. I'd like to introduce the balance of our team that's here tonight. And so to my right, this is Reggie Gilliard. Reggie's also a partner with BCG. And across from me, Nika Rimmer. She's a partner as well. And then Lane McBride is our project manager, and he'll be the day-to-day project manager for the work that we're doing with you. And then behind me are three of our consultants, Delano Brissett, Nithya Vadaganathan, who's a project leader, and Jamie Rooney. And so we'll be working with the commission, but also with the individual committees, and we'll have plenty of time to get to know one another. But it's our pleasure to be with you here tonight, and we look forward to working with you. Let me start with just an introduction to the agenda that we intend to go through tonight, and you'll see as we get into this that there'll be a bit of background information that we'll share with you, and then we'll get into a very interactive part of the meeting when we'll break up into some breakout groups. But the initial part of the meeting will go through the transition plan approach and the decision-making process that we're proposing. And we'll give you an opportunity to comment on what we've proposed there. Then we're going to switch the order of the next two. We're going to do a very quick communications update, which will take just about 5 minutes, an update from that committee. And then Nika Rimmer will introduce the visioning session. And the visioning session will talk about what you have as hopes and aspirations for getting out of this merger. And we've had one-on-one conversations with each of you, but it's important for all of you to come together and talk about what you want to achieve as a part of the merger. And then we'll talk also about what you see as the primary obstacles, and we'll talk about what you see as the medium-term priorities. And then we'll come back together. After that. And so the hour and 15 minutes after dinner is the period of time where we'll be breaking into breakout groups to have those facilitated sessions. We'll have one of the sessions up here in the front. We'll have one at the end of this table, and we'll have one in the back corner. And then, as I said, we'll bring the whole group back together and do a report out on those breakout sessions. And then we're going to talk about guiding principles at that point, the principles that we'll use as we think through various decisions, and we bring recommendations forward to you as your advisors based on best practices and based on the practices that exist today in the community. And when we bring those recommendations forward, the decisions will need to be held up against a set of guiding principles that you want to make sure are achieved as a part of this. And so we're going to try to establish those, at least a draft of those today. And there'll be plenty of opportunity. I would call it wet cement at the end of the meeting where we'll have those guiding principles. There will be an opportunity for finalizing that, and then we'll firm those up, because those will then be the principles that we'll keep coming back to make sure that as you consider your work, that you're upholding the principles that you set out at the beginning. And then we'll close. And so that's the deliverables for this meeting are a summary of the aspirations, the concerns and barriers, and the medium-term priorities, as well as a list of the guiding principles that will guide your decision making. And so that's what we're going to try to achieve in the 4 hours that we have together. So you all have a document that's in front of you. There's a little bit of material that we're going to go through as we get into this.
Jay, Madam Chairman, is there any reason why we're not doing a working dinner? Why are we not working through that 30 minutes rather than just eating?
We could do that if the group would like to do that. I thought that you might want to just to relax, but if you'd like to work through, we can certainly do that. Is that the will of this committee? Well, okay, we'll do that then. Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. McDonald.
So that'll give us a little bit more time for the breakout discussions.
I think maybe, Jay, they were hoping to get out a little bit sooner.
That'll give y'all a little more time to drive home then.
That's what I like about you. Just be able to adjust.
We try to learn fast. All right. So do you want to try to then adjust the agenda to end a half an hour early?
I think that's what they're asking for, yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll just consider that an adjustment to the agenda. So I'm on page 2 now, the topics that we're going to go over in this section, and I'm going to introduce a couple of my colleagues to go over this, but we're going to first talk about the process for getting us from where we are today to a transition plan report, which will be decided by this group in the summer, and we'll talk through that process leading up to that. We'll also talk through a list of the types of topics that we anticipate to be addressed in that report, and then talk about the decision-making process that we're going to recommend for you. And in any situation like this, where you have many stakeholders in a community that have just a strong interest in the outcome of an effort like this, there are many voices that need to be taken into consideration, and the decision-making process is complex. And so we're going to propose a decision-making process, which we believe deals with that complexity, but we're going to also have to be mindful as a group to be attentive to the complexities as they may arise and make appropriate adjustments to that decision-making process. And then we're also going to talk about how you can rely upon us, both as a commission and as individual committee members, for our help through this process, and we'll describe how we'll be able to help you. And then at the end, we'll close with our immediate next steps. So I'm going to turn things over to Reggie Gilliard, who's going to walk you through the process.
Yeah, let me hit the first 2 topics on that last sheet, and then Wayne will stand up and talk about the decision-making process. So this is just an orienting slide that puts.
Can we have a mic, please?
I'm sorry, sir.
A mic?
No. Maybe I should sit and talk then, huh?
It's a long table back.
It may be
Good?
All right. How's that? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, this is just an orienting diagram to say what part of the work that we're concerned with versus what's going to happen kind of post this work. So if you look at the first block, that's the actual process that we're in, which is the transition plan development and approval. There are some things, obviously, that need to happen after that to get you to the launch of a new school district. So there's a stage 2, which will be staff selection, so selection of the superintendent and the administrative staff, some additional detailed financial and operational planning and budgeting, and then the launch, of course, of the new school year. And then, once you get through that, launch of the new school year, where you have some things which will likely continue in terms of operational tasks that need to continue beyond. You'll get into a kind of a steady state of district operations probably about a year later. But as I said, we're concerned with the first block. The board and the district leadership will be concerned with the last 3 stages. So if you click down on that, what's happening in this block? Obviously, there are a set of legal requirements that need to be addressed in the plan that we develop, and that's kind of only part of this in our view. We think that there also will be some things as we work through the committees that will be part of a unified vision and plan for the academic success of the combined district. What are those things above and beyond the legal requirements that we aspire to for academic success in the future? In addition to that, we'll be looking at some things around kind of the cost side of the the equation and thinking about the fiscal sustainability of that district going forward. Are there cost savings opportunities that can be developed as part of this process? And then lastly, there'll be some things that that aren't even in that list, but are kind of things that are important to think about to make sure that you have a coherent process and timeline for the transition of the district. So that's the calendaring beyond our work that gets you to an actual implementation after the work is done here. So we've developed just a framework for thinking about how all of those things fit together and give some examples of what fits into the various buckets. So as I discussed, there are kind of on the left some things that are legally required, some things that will be contributing to the academic success long term, and some things that are around kind of budget implications and cost implications. And our view is that those are directly related to the things that we will come up with a design or a decision on in the part of this plan. An example of that would be, and people have already started to discuss this, the administrative organization. What is the middle layer look like? How do you organize the district across various dimensions and whatever dimensions we decide that may be, and that'll result in likely some boxes and drawing of some boxes. Now, what is not in the left of that category, but critical to the components in effective transition, which we would design a process for, might be a process for the selection of the administrative staff. So names and boxes, for example. And then there will be a set of things that aren't in any of those two buckets that will be left to the decision of kind of management and the board and won't be addressed in the plan. And an example of that might be, we kind of made one up here, middle school textbook. The key box at the bottom, too, is to say that this is just a high-level framework. The specifics of the scope for each of the committees will be developed between kind of BCG and the committees. And we've already started the process of developing what we call charters for each of the committees, which we will complete by the early part of January and bring back to this body so that we get a consistent view of what the detailed scope for each committee will be. Any questions on just the last couple slides? Is all of that clear? Great. All right, I'd like to turn it over to Lane and just ask him to kind of get us into, okay, if that's what we're talking about, that's what's going to be in the plan, how will we go about the process of making decisions on those things?
So briefly before we talk about decision making, we have one more page here that gives an overview of this first stage, the transition planning stage of the effort. And you have seen a more detailed version of this in the statement of work that was attached to the BCG contract. Just want to call out some high-level points here. So what we're doing right now is in that top left box around aligning on scope and vision and guiding principles. A couple of other priorities for now until the end of January include the work that Kenya and Jim and the Communications and Stakeholder Engagement Committee are doing to begin a series of conversations with the communities and with specific individuals in the two districts and with other stakeholders. And then a core piece of work that's already begun in many of the other committees, as you know, is down here at the bottom, where there's a lot of work already going on that will continue for the coming weeks around understanding where Memphis City schools and Shelby County schools are today, practices and programs, and also bringing in external perspectives from other school districts and organizations outside of this area. As we move into the February, March, April timeframe, that's where the deep work of those committees begins in terms of making decisions that ultimately become recommendations of the committees. And you see here we've sequenced a couple of things first. So decisions that relate to the education and academic support priorities and decisions around the administrative structure of the district necessarily come first because lots of other things relate back to those. And so you would see the committees working on those decisions coming together and putting forward recommendations first, and then the operational transition plan, operations, logistics, some of the HR and finance issues coming in behind that, as well as ensuring that all of the legally required elements of the transition plan have been covered. So that's a general sequence, and like Reggie said, this gets much more specific within the individual committees, which are working on putting together these charters that lay out specifically what are the decisions that need to be made within a given committee. As you know, after that, all of those individual committees' work comes together, and you see up here on the top right a plan report agreed upon by the TPC, and we're going to talk in just a second about the process for coming to agreement, a proposed process, and then the plan goes to the Board of Education and the Tennessee Department of Education. So as we flip over to the next page, we're just going to spend a couple of minutes putting forward a proposed process for making decisions. And when we talk about making decisions, we're really talking about 3 sets of decisions. So the first set is deciding what this commission is going to make recommendations about, deciding the scope of the recommendations. And Reggie's already put forward a point of view that we have as a starting point for kind of a framework to guide that. The next set of decisions are around the committee's decisions on what they are recommending as elements of the transition plan. And then the last part, which we'll cover on the next page, is the process for the entire commission coming to a decision. So on the first, the confirmation of scope, that's something that's going to happen in the next few weeks, and you'll hear a report back from BCG and committee chairs in January around the specific decisions that each of the committees would make. The second category here in terms of the committee input. So here, the committees will go about their work in gathering information, in working together with the stakeholder and community engagement team to pull in the input of the broader community and many of the stakeholders. And those committees and BCG at the same time will be identifying interdependencies. So, many of these committees cover issues that have very tight relationships with each other. So the educational committee will have a lot of things that have to do with teachers, and so will HR, right? The logistics committee and the finance committee have a lot of interdependencies around the operational transition plan for the districts. So the committees in our team will be working to identify those interdependencies and raising them to the executive committee, and if needed, the full TPC for additional discussion and decisions. The other point on here, the third bullet point in the second set, is that the chair also has discretion to raise topics that are being discussed in individual committees for discussion with the entire TPC. And we do anticipate that. We don't anticipate that committees will go off and do their work and not tell anybody else about what's going on until they're done. Right? There will be ongoing discussion with the full group. And then the final point on this page is that we expect that each committee will seek to build a consensus within their group around a set of recommendations, and that would be certainly the preference. But if there's voting that's needed, then a majority vote of a committee would put forward that committee's work to the full commission for inclusion in the broader plan, which we'll talk about in a second. Before we go there, I just want to see if there are any questions from the group about what I've been talking about for the last couple minutes.
I do.
Sure.
On the last one, will minority reports be given as well as majority reports if it comes to a vote? Is that?
That's a process that we've used before, and I think personally, I think it's a good idea, but I don't know if others have thoughts on that. Is there
Are we
any other
asking
comment?
the group? Yeah.
Is there any disagreement with that?
No. No, I think that as a group, we know that there may be some disagreements. We understand that our job is to come to a recommendation. So if needs be, it would have to be with a majority vote. But I see no problem with understanding what the other. If there is a strong minority position that it could be made known to this committee.
And the idea there would be that there's an agreement that's been reached by the committee by majority vote,
Correct.
but there's transparency of
That's it.
a minority opinion, if the committee chooses to make that, if they think that it merits it. Is that what the request is?
Very much
Yeah.
like if we are operating as a public entity, so if you were at a commission meeting, another commission meeting, it would be a public, you would be able to see that there was not a unanimous opinion, but still I think that we do need to commit to yield to the majority opinion.
Yeah. And we're not saying that this would be a requirement of a committee to always voice the minority opinions. It's just if there is strength, if they felt strongly enough that they would have that as an option. Right?
I think one of the key aspects of that is for our stakeholders to see that perhaps some ideas they may have are being put on the table, that we're just not, sweeping them aside. So I think it'll be a key part, because if we don't, our communication committee may be in hot water a lot.
And I would add, who would be the they that would determine that that minority opinion would be substantiated? Who would be the they? So I'm asking for clarification as to who would be the they. Meaning the committee?
The committee.
I would think the committee
would determine whether the minority has a position or not.
Just clarification, please, on that first item where it says recommended team charters. Could you give me an explanation of exactly what you have in mind in that sentence, please?
Sure. So the team charters would be a document for each of the committees that explains the decisions that committee would be empowered to make recommendations on, the members of the team, the interdependencies anticipated between that team's work and other teams' work, and some key milestone dates for when that committee's decisions need to be made in order to fit with the overall process.
Thanks.
I'm not sure we reached closure on the minority report. I'd like to revisit that and bring closure to it.
I think that's a fair point. And I was actually just, Reggie and I were just talking for a second about potentially an alternative way to handle that. Because if for instance, the committee reaches majority vote and then the committee then votes again whether a minority opinion should have voice, they could reach the same conclusion not to give voice to that minority opinion by majority vote. And so as an alternative, I'd propose that if there's a majority reached by the committee, that then becomes the recommendation of the committee, but that if any member of the committee feels that feels strongly that a minority opinion should be voiced as a part of the recommendation, that they have the right to bring voice to that.
I think that's great, but it needs to be crystal clear that the original vote prevailed, and to Mr. Hart's position, that the individual would have a right to publicize the minority opinion,
Right.
but it wouldn't resort to a second vote.
Does that seem a fair way to adjust
Yes, and
this process?
if I could remind commission members to try to get a mic so that Dr. Green, so that we can hear. So Dr. Green's, so recap, Jay, what you're hearing here, and then let's see if we can come to agreement.
What I'm hearing is that the process that Lane described would be the process for trying to move the group toward decision, right? So that if ideally a committee comes to consensus, ideally, that's
Right.
the goal. Lacking a consensus, ability to come to a consensus, there would be a vote held. In the event that a vote is needed, that a majority vote would carry the committee's recommendation forward to this group. In the event that there's a strong minority voice that wishes to be heard alongside the vote, one member of that committee can choose to have that voice heard. But it doesn't change the committee's vote. It just is for the purposes of transparency. Does that seem fair?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Is that something that we feel like we need to agree on by vote right now, or do we just need to say, is there any objection to that? Richard?
bring up my understanding of the committee's work and the fact that the committee would bring a recommendation before the full commission, but the full commission would have to approve
Exactly.
the committee's work.
And we
So-
haven't gotten to that.
So even though the committee had a majority vote and brought their recommendation to the commission, and if there was minority opinion that was also brought to the commission by those people, those persons, the full commission could go with the minority side.
Sure.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sure could.
Thank you for that comment, Richard. And I think that they're getting to that slide next in terms of what comes back to the commission. So is everyone, let's practice the possibility of coming to consensus on at this point, okay? Is there any objection to what we've just discussed as the process that by which we would operate? All right, hearing none, we come to consensus on that.
Right. All right, so now we'll talk about the decision-making process for the transition plan as a whole. So if you flip over to the next page, you can see the BCG team would take the work of the committees and compile it into a draft transition plan. And all members of the TPC would then have opportunity to review the plan, to make comments, to make suggestions for changes to the plan. And then there would be a workshop for the group to discuss the proposed revisions. And just as we discussed on the committees, the preference would be that the revisions would be brought to consensus, but if that consensus isn't reached, then there would be a process of voting on revisions to the draft. Once all revisions have been considered and the group determines that there aren't specific issues to be discussed, then the plan would come for a vote of the commission. And again, a consensus vote is the desire, but majority vote would be employed as needed. And I suppose as a friendly amendment from the discussion just now, we would say that the minority report process would be the same in the full commission as it is in the committee. So that plan would then be submitted for an additional process with the Board of Education and the State Department of Education, which is also probably worth a conversation of this group, but not something we had planned to discuss tonight. Are there comments on this process?
Can I just ask a question, what you mean by the same minority report provision would apply for the whole decision? Because that's where the whole commission has made a decision. So I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm just confused.
Okay. So I can say what I meant, but it may be that it's not the commission's opinion. So what I was expressing is that you could have a similar process of individual commission members expressing their opinions on the entire report. But are you suggesting that that might not be a good idea?
Well, I think my point is that it's obviously going to be noted if people do not support the ultimate outcome and there isn't consensus, there are going to be people who are in support of it and then people who vote against it. And that's going to be a pretty public situation, I expect. I don't know what you mean by a minority report in that circumstance.
Well, in some cases, commission members may want to express an explanation for why they had a certain opinion. That's the sense of it I had.
If I may on this, it seems that in the initial process, bringing forth that minority position creates an opportunity for the full commission to hear that and to consider that in their decision. Yeah. At this point, all things are being heard, all things are being considered, and then as a commission, once we make our decision, I think the process of hearing the minority position will be during the discussion as we are airing it around the table. And so I would feel really strongly that those positions will be heard, but once we make that final decision, whether it be by consensus or a vote, that then stands as the as the single decision of the commission, knowing that there may have been other opinions.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
You like that?
Yeah, I like
Not to beat a dead horse here, but the question I have is are we going to be approving from this model specific parts of the plan up to the final plan, or are we going to, basically say we develop a plan for teacher effectiveness, okay, and the education group comes up with that. I assume would come back to this group and for approval, and if there's a minority report, who cares? What I'm saying, do we approve that piece of it and then at the end approve the entire plan, or do we? You know what I'm saying here, how do we?
You're making us laugh, John.
I mean, are we approving pieces of the plan and then the entire plan, or are we approving one entire plan?
This has been an ongoing question as to whether the approval would come for the plan in total or whether it would be done in pieces.
Yeah, what we've seen as most successful is ultimately this group has to put forward a whole plan, right? And so at some point you have to vote a whole plan up or down. We do envision, and Lane has described, a process that would allow revisions to a plan that comes forward. You know, so there will be a plan that will be considered, and then there will be an opportunity for discussion and votes on revisions to that plan, which would in effect be parts of the plan, votes on parts of the plan. But in the end, once that revision process is complete, we envision that this group needs to do an up or down on the entirety of the plan.
Mr. Puckett, I just want to ask a question just on process. So what we're saying is that committees will bring information as relevant to the full committee. The committee will be presented that information, and then all of the committee's reports will be combined into a full plan, and then the full committee would then vote on that plan.
Full commission.
Full commission.
Yes.
That's right.
But
I think that that John's question is driven perhaps by a thought that we might need to go to the State Board of Education and or the school board in advance of completing the final plan and sort of get their feedback. Are we going in the right direction? Is this something that y'all will implement? And so I think that maybe that's what the question was.
And that's a good question. We have not included in this document for today because we intended to have a broader discussion around the process post the approval of this commission of the plan. There is a whole process to get approval, which is the last bullet on here. But there's a whole process that we've anticipated for comments, both from the board and from the state. A revisitation of how to incorporate those comments by this group, and if it requires modification, there would be a modification period. Then there would be a revisitation by the commission to adopt the newly revised plan, and then a second comment period with the same process. You know, but always coming back to the commission to ensure that the integrity of the originally adopted plan is preserved to the greatest extent possible, while still incorporating the comments from those two bodies. So that there is a process that's envisioned for that post the last bullet on here.
Yeah, I have one other question, and I think it's going some to this, and this is murky. But for instance, on the previous slide, we did discuss the fact that there might be items that were determined needed to be brought to the full commission out of committee. And I can think about that as being, for instance, the organizational structure and governance. That if we don't have a sense from the whole committee that recommendation that's coming, from the whole commission, that recommendation is acceptable, then that so affects everything else. And that would be an example of approving a piece before the total plan was approved. I hope that we don't, we may not need, there may just be a few that need to be done like that, but I can envision that as being one example. I don't know what everyone else thinks. Do you want me to call on people, or do you want to?
we can do it. And I think Kenya had her hand up a while ago, then Demare McDonald.
So I just wanted to comment on Mr. Keel's piece around bringing the information to the Department of Ed and the board. I believe that it's appropriate that we communicate with them and we include them in the development, but I would caution us to not need their approval on different pieces before we move forward, because my understanding of our charge, it is not of them needing to accept what we're doing or believe that this is implementable. We need to create a plan, which is our vision for what schools should look like, and that may not be in the current scope of what they see is possible. And so I'm just saying, I think we include them. They are members of the process, but I think we need to have further discussion about, do we go to them in piecemeal of approval? And I just think that we're getting into some minutiae in this conversation, so we might need to move on.
Mayor McDonald.
As I understand what you're saying, basically, the plan is amendable up to the final vote.
Yes.
So there's no worry. I don't see where any of us would have any worry that at some point we're going to be shut out of further discussion. It's amendable up to the final vote. So
That's correct. That's the intention of the process.
That's right. That's good.
However, I do think as we work through this, we're going to have certain decisions that are going to have to be made that will then be so intertwined with the framework of everything else that revisiting those initial decisions will be impractical and will cause us to miss our deadline or otherwise not get this done the way we need to get it done. And we're just going to have to see how that goes.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody else who looks eager to comment, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic. And Chairman Prescott, did you want to get a consensus on this piece of the process?
I'm sorry.
I'm
a bad student back here.
I saw you guys were talking in the back of the class over there.
I have no idea.
blame it on somebody else.
That's right, it's his fault.
Okay, throw him under the bus.
I'm sorry.
You had called for a consensus on the previous page. I just wanted to see if you wanted to do it with this one as well.
Sure. Is there any objection to what we have up here at this point? I think that we do have a comment that we want to talk about.
It's just a comment, but I think we've got to have some provision. I mean, the reality of it, in the final analysis, the school board has the option of approving or not approving our plan. Right. And if there is a snag somewhere with the school board, there's got to be some provision for bringing that back to us to reopen to address that snag. Now, I agree with Kenya. We don't want to piecemeal this thing to them. But if we can get this thing resolved by just simply coming back after the school board's reviewed it, reopening whatever needs to be reopened, and reviewing it again, I think that would be time well spent. So let's not slam that door.
Well, Chairman Prescott is meeting and giving a report to the board once a month. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And
Okay.
so that's one mechanism. But
So I'm saying that if you are making a report to the board once a month, surely there is some dialogue that would give them an understanding of the directions that we are traveling. And you would have feedback from them sufficient to bring it back to this body so we would have input from that board ongoing and we could tinker with our plan as we progress. And it seems to me that that would be sufficient.
So in addition to that, there is a piece, and I'll go over it again because I think it's important and it's not included in the language on this page, but it was included in the contract that we worked out with the commission, and that is the stage, what's called the phase D part of our work, which is happening between the summer and the end of the year, right? Which is there's anticipated that there would be, once a plan is approved by this group, that there would then we recognize that it then has to be approved by 2 other groups. And we've anticipated a comment period along with the ability for this group to review those comments, incorporate changes as you see fit, and then reapprove the plan with those amendments, then go back out to both of those groups for a second comment period following the same process, allowing additional amendments to be made, a review again by this group to approve the full plan with those final edits, and then at that point to go forward and request an up or down vote from each of those 2 groups in sequence. Now they will have had opportunities all along for the updates, as Dr. Green described, but they would also have opportunities for 2 cycles of comments, and then you would have opportunities to incorporate as you see fit and react to those comments while still preserving the integrity of the original plan. So that's the process. That's the door that's left open for you as a committee, if you will, and I'd invite your reactions to that.
Well, first of all, I'm going to ask Mayor Luttrell if that answers to some extent what he is concerned about. I think that the issue is we want a plan that is approvable. I mean, right. We definitely, or we would have been wasting much of our time. But we are charged with, first and foremost, of setting out the plan that we believe as kind of the conscience of the community is the right plan. If I'm understanding you, and then Mayor Luttrell, you see if this answers what I'm hearing from Dr. Green is that there, yes, will be an ongoing process by which I'm speaking with the board, and 2, at the last meeting, Mayor Luttrell, you mentioned that you would like to, and we will institute that in the beginning of the year, Ms. Brown, if you could remember that, to have a place on our agenda where our school board representatives, Mr. Pickler, Mr. Jones is not here, will also be reporting to us. So that's going to be a 2-way, ongoing. Then if I'm hearing what you're saying, Jay, as we have had our deadline as being August 30th for having that completed plan, you're going to have the plan ready to us, and we're going to work to get that plan ready. I think that's what makes this even more important, to have it done by mid-June or whatever time that you're talking about. And then at that time, there will be that period of time where there could be some back and forth. We could make some amendments. We could make some tweaks. We know they're going to love the plan, but other than that, we might. So does that answer your concern, Mayor? Okay. Then we're cool.
Mr. Keel had
It was just
Are
about
you good?
timing, and I think you answered.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic here. One of the questions as we've gone around and met with the members of the commission that our team has heard is what exactly is it that the BCG consultants will be doing to help the TPC? And so we've described the process and all the teams, and wanted to just take a step back from that and talk about, in general, what is it that our team is aiming to do to assist the commission. So there are several things you can see here on page 9 in the materials, both within the committees and then across the committees. And there are a couple things that are the same in both. So facilitation, developing the agendas and materials for group meetings, and also helping to bring put forward a process for making decisions in those meetings, and to help to hold the committees and the commission accountable for making decisions that fit into the broader timeline of the effort. One of the things you see over on the left side is working with the committees to bring in external research, so drawing on the experience of our team and the experience of other school districts and other localities that have gone through similar processes or on specific topics have done innovative and successful things. Structuring informations to inform decisions, that's the analytics piece there. Serving as a thought partner, that just means bringing in an external perspective and listening to your ideas and sharing our ideas and working together to come to better ideas. and project management. So ensuring that all of these moving parts and pieces across all the committees are not happening in parallel and silos, but rather as part of a coordinated process where interdependencies are identified and managed. And finally, bringing the work of the committees and the commission to synthesis. So putting forward that draft of the overall transition plan and then helping to facilitate the process of the commission's revision and approval of it. So I hope that's helpful to give a little bit more general sense of things, but are there any questions from the commission on this piece? Okay. So to start something that I think will likely happen on a fairly regular basis with this group, we wanted to just provide a brief update of the work of the BCG team together with the many hard-working committee members. There's a progress report on page 10, which summarizes that the team has, as Jay said, interviewed the members of the commission as well as the superintendents, Dr. Atkin and Dr. Cash, and the chair of the board. There's been initial work with the different committees. The communications committee is going to talk in a minute, so I'm not going to repeat what they're up to. There's also been an initial meeting of our team together with the administration committee, and there will be a presentation of some of those initial external benchmarks, external research at that committee's meeting on the 5th of January. We're meeting with the assessment and educational services chairs on Monday to begin outlining the scope and talking about one of the big interdependencies of how those two different committees work together. And we will be having meetings within the first couple weeks of January, hopefully the first week, with the chairs of finance and HR and logistics to start to lay out a process for those committees as well, syncing up on the work that's already been done and identifying specifically how the BCG team can help out. The next page just gives an overview of some of the near-term priorities for our team, which are a lot of the near-term priorities of the commission as a whole. I'm not going to read down the page in its entirety, but we'll call out the work with the communications committee, which is critical to get off to a good start with engaging the community, working with the committee chairs on those team charters that Mayor McDonald asked about earlier, and some also beginning the work around pulling in external benchmarks and opinion expertise from elsewhere. So that's the brief update, and you can anticipate updates like that for the commission in future meetings. Are there any other questions or comments at this point? Okay. I'm going to turn it over back to Jay.
Okay, I think we're now going to do a brief update. Get a brief update from the communications committee, and so I'm going to call on the communications committee to give that update.
So we are handing you out a packet of information from where we are as a committee. Thank you. So what we're asking you to do, and in addition, one thing I want to add to going over the proposal of the what are our phases of engagement. In the first phase, in listen and learn, in addition to the listen and learn portion from our committee, we received feedback today that we want to add a piece about. This is about community education and giving everyone a baseline level of knowledge about where we are as a commission and also what the process is. And then the second piece is around us really engaging and gaining buy-in. And lastly, informing. The key to both of these pieces is that we want to create a process where individuals are able to give feedback, and then we're also receiving information from them and giving them information on a regular basis. The second page is the comprehensive strategy that we're looking at creative. We do not believe that this is complete. It is really just a baseline, our starting point for what we feel like is how we need to go out into the community. We believe that this is a continual process where we're going to be engaging stakeholders for the entire process. In January and in February, we're going to have these preliminary inbound meetings where we're going out and sharing some information about what we're doing, where we are in the process, and then we're also going to share the guiding principles and visions that we're discussing and creating today. And as you see, in March and April, go through the second piece of engaging and gaining buy-in. In May and June, going through the process of informing our community about the pieces that each committee is creating. So this is a process where we're not only as we're getting educated, we're also educating the community. And then the last piece is really just our call to action of what we need your help and your input on. We need each member of the commission to help us identify key influencers across Shelby County. We want to ensure that we're getting information of who are the stakeholders and the connectors in our community that we need to be outreaching to so that we can get them engaged in this process. We are asking for key individual and groups to engage inside of the city and the counties, and we want to make sure that we're paying specific attention to the six municipalities. So if there are stakeholders and contacts in those communities, we're asking you to send that information back to our committee. And then we're also asking, in addition to the pieces that are on this committee, each of you are getting requests for meetings or to participate in them. We're asking that you share that information back to the committee because we're wanting to provide you content that you can share out to the community. And then we also want to track where are we speaking in the community to be able to know how many people have we reached and how many people are getting information about this process. I know we were supposed to be short and sweet because my chairwoman told me to be brief. Are there any questions about the information that we have in the homework assignment that we're asking you to do?
I'll try to use my teacher voice if you're in the microphone.
We're going to give the mic to you.
I don't mean to prolong this, but you mentioned Memphis and the 6 county municipalities. What about the unincorporated areas of Shelby County?
So that's why I corrected what was on. I actually corrected in my speech of saying Shelby County instead of saying Memphis and the 6
That's why.
municipalities.
Okay.
I'm actually
Thank
saying
you.
we need contact from all of the counties.
Thank you.
I understand the sequence and agree with that mostly, but one question would be some of the biggest fears out there from existing teachers and from some county families and students, and some of the biggest fears that all of us have heard can most quickly be diffused like right away. I mean, it seems like some of these things, instead of waiting for this process, including waiting till the end of February, we could knock out some of the worst fears with some of the few things we'll all agree on. And certain things can't happen to teachers that they're worried about, and certain transfer of kids. And it seems like we should be frantic on some of the third box. Instead of waiting for a well-organized thing at the end of February, could we knock out some things right away?
Yes, so I apologize if that's how I speak. Thank you. I apologize if I misstated. We're actually going to be educating them from the beginning and really addressing some of those concerns as we start. Our first meeting is going to be on January 10th, and that will be a part of all meetings going forward. So we're having a process where we're talking to them about what is the TPC, Unified School Board, but we're also giving them an opportunity to ask some questions and address some of the fears, and where we're actively answering in those meetings. So I hope that answers your question, Ms. Kate.
It does mostly. There's still a part, though, that, for example, it's not either a plan or consensus or later to be determined thing, for example, on some of the teacher stuff that's in the legal statute. I mean, if we do nothing more than point some teachers to what this commission has to do, that alone is comforting, and it doesn't take either interpretation or give and take or articulation or agreement. It's just we can't fire teachers and change all their benefits this way. And it just seems like some of this we could do kind of right away. And if y'all's committee
includes that, I think it'd be great for like let's do this in a few hours instead of some of this has to be, weeks and months.
Could a part of your homework, could a part of our homework to you be a listing of concerns that we have heard in our respective communities, and that could be a part of our homework, and then you could begin to format a system of delivering that information in a comprehensive report.
Yes, Dr. Green, if you all send that information to our committee and also to BCG, then we'll compile that information.
So I think that there's, I'm sorry, I think that there's two things. One, in the visioning session that we're going to have in a few minutes, we are going to cover not just aspirations and visions, but also concerns. And we're going to take some time tonight to get some of those concerns. I don't want to close off the concept of you sending the concerns in your homework as well, but we're going to start to capture those tonight. We are also going to walk out of tonight with some of the guiding principles, the wet cement of the guiding principles. The idea was that for the listen and learns, they would lead with 15 minutes of us doing just basic information, what the TPC is, what the law says, what the Combined Board of Education is, what our process is, high level, again, not more than 15 minutes, of getting to a plan and what the guiding principles are. Those things together should answer some of the fears. There are going to be fears that we can't answer because we don't have a decision made yet, and those are going to remain open, and we will, and it is a time, the listening sessions are a time for us to hear those, capture those, and be able to let people know that we've heard them, but we're not going to be able to answer all of them. I think that, Staley, you're bringing up a very good point of what about other venues besides these sessions to be able to make sure that that information is getting out. And we also talked about an online venue to make sure that that consistent set of information, that 15-minute short presentation that gives just the facts and the guiding principles of how we're going to get to a plan is made available to all as well, and we'll add that.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks.
Were there any of the additional questions or comments? Jim? Daniel's passing one to you.
Do we have that worksheet for the key folks that we want to get that was distributed to the committee? Could that be made available to the whole commission?
We don't have the copies today, but we can make sure everybody gets them.
Could we might be able to get that done tonight, perchance? Is that a possibility? So
if you have a sheet, there is a copying machine that they told me was unlimited copies, but if somebody can do that. But.
So basically what we have, go ahead. You want to go ahead?
It could be emailed in the morning.
Well, basically what we have is a format that will help you identify the names of key persons and organizations across the community. We hope that will be useful.
Okay, we're about to have a break where we can go and get our food and then come back to this table as that. But before we do, I'd like to recognize a few people. If you all will forgive me for calling your names with my back to you, this feels a little strange, but we always appreciate everyone that is here, and so this is not to say that anyone is more or less important, but we certainly are happy to have both of our superintendents with us tonight, Dr. Cash and Mr. Atkin. We have a number of Shelby County School Board members, Billy Orgel, the chairman. Is Billy still here? Thank you, Billy, for coming. He missed a party to come tonight. I know that. And we have Dr. Frida Williams, Stephanie Gatewood, Teresa Jones, Kevin Woods, Betty Malott, Reginald Porter, Tamika Hart, and Christopher Caldwell. So I think this speaks to the fact that we are working together. We know our interrelatedness. We know we have different roles, but we really appreciate you being here tonight. And I also would like to recognize someone who is the third mayor, it feels like, on our team, because she's always here, is Mayor Sharon Goldsworthy. And thank all of you for being here tonight. Okay, so I think the plan is to take a few minutes, get our food, come back, and resume our work so that we can get out just a few minutes early. Okay. tell you the truth. Mayor McDonald's always those who are on the commission and our consultants, if you can begin making your way back, because we're eating here so that we can save time. So let's come on back. You have to do it this time.
Stanley, don't back off of your statement because that's important. The fears need to be suppressed.
I'd recommend since some women are cussing deep down the lap, they get out of the lap of the men can have the table.
We were going to have church and dress. Green bean.
I think we're still missing a couple of people.
Nick, I think we're back.
Okay, thanks everyone. If we are ready to get started again, I'm just going to introduce the visioning session that we're going to do for the next hour. And before we do that, I want to take a minute. We've had this conversation in different BCG groupings with many of you on aspirations. And I know that you've all had the conversation yourself as well. There is still an important piece that we think that the value of doing it as a group and then coming out of it as a group and having a report back. Multiple benefits of that. One of which is the fact that I think everybody has similar visions and aspirations in parts, and it's important to hear those similarities. And it's important to hear that this is a win-win, that there's a hope to create a win-win for all kids in Shelby County from many, many different people, and have that be positioned differently because everybody says it in a different voice, but it's something that we're hearing over and over again, and so I'd encourage us to listen to each other as we hear it. I think that there's also a piece that is about why are we doing visioning now instead of starting with some of the best practices that we'll absolutely bring from the BCG lens, both from our experiences and from other benchmarking. And just before we get into this, a quick story about a car that I am now a proud owner of, the minivan. I don't know how many people, Reggie's sitting there laughing at me right now because I have a new minivan. But I don't, excellent. I don't know how many of you know the minivan story. And the fact that the minivan, when it came out in the mid-'80s, was built by Chrysler, but it was actually started in the early 70s as a design. And the idea of a passenger van, of a company that specialized in passenger vans, which Chrysler did, it had about 45% of the market share, thinking about how do I get this into families, because families were steadily buying station wagons, and they needed the ability to transport more people, but they also wanted something that was attractive, that they could feel good about driving on a daily basis. They needed something that fit in their garages, that they could see over, and they needed several things that the passenger van didn't do. Now, car companies have been working on taking a passenger van and making it smaller for many, many years, but instead, Chrysler actually started with the requirements. What do I need this van to do? I needed to be attractive. I need mothers in particular to want to drive it. I needed to be garageable. They actually had the word garageable on their screen. Excuse me. And they instead started with the requirements. And the fact is that they ended up with a completely different chassis than the passenger van. And that's why our minivans fit in our garages. And so I encourage us to think about the possible, as opposed to thinking about where we're starting, which we'll all come back to. We'll come back to what's great about both of the districts today, and we'll come back to what's great about different benchmarks. But instead of thinking about that as a starting point, we should think about the end point and where we want to be, similar to the way that they thought about the minivan in terms of where do we want to go and actually changing things. Because I think that one of the reasons that we're all so excited to be here with you today is the potential of Memphis being the new guiding star Shelby County Schools being the new guiding star and true north for what is going to happen in the future of public education. And that doesn't have to start with anything as a starting point other than whatever your vision is. So that's what we're going to do for the next hour or so. What we want to do is produce a set of guiding principles. And in those guiding principles, they should incorporate long-term aspirations for what we see as the school district, but also the concerns and barriers that, again, all of you have heard from different constituencies and all of you know that we should be thinking about as we go in. And in particular, we need to think about near-term priorities, because this transition plan that we have to come out with has to actually get us through the transition. And so these will be current hypotheses, there'll be things that we'll continue to test, but really these are the three subject areas that we're going to talk about. And coming out of that, we'll have guiding principles that we take out of today that we will use as our true north as we make decisions going forward. Again, you've had a hopes and fears conversation. We're not going to ignore that. We're going to build off of that. And the interviews that we've had to have this conversation about aspirations, hopes and fears, and near-term priorities. We're going to ask to do it in breakout groups, though, because that's a better grouping for us to make sure everyone is heard. And so we have 3 breakout group locations. One will be done at this table in the front. One will be done back close to where Chairman Prescott is, and one will be done in the far back. And I'll tell you how the grouping should go in just a moment. And we will facilitate this conversation, but this will be your conversation. We'll take some notes. And at 7 o'clock, so we'll do this from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, we'll all come back together, and one of the groups will read out what their findings were and what their discussion was about, and then the other 2 groups will add on to that. So it's not that the other 2 groups won't be heard, but it will be additive as opposed to doing a full review. One thing that's really important is that this discussion is really to do 2 things. One, to make sure that we get the commonalities, because again, we heard a lot of commonalities. We'd like for you to hear them as well. There's also a diversity of perspectives, and so we want to be able to showcase that during this conversation as well. We'll come out of this with this starting list of guiding principles. This is not the final word, though. We will come back and revisit this again, and then we will have guiding principles that the commission all agrees upon, and we'll use those in our decision-making process. So, questions? Okay, so let me tell you who the groups are. So, breakout group A will be up here. Breakout group B will be back where Chairman Prescott is, at the table, the back end of the table, and breakout group C will be in the far back corner. Okay?
Want us to go now?
I want you to go now.
This way. Would all the members of the Transition Planning Commission move back in? If there's anybody out in the hallway, it's 5 after 7, so we're on schedule 30 minutes early, right?
Yeah.
Kinda. Kind of, sort of 30 minutes early on schedule? All right. I'm going to clean up somebody's mess right here before we go further.
What are you doing, Chairwoman? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Those were mine.
Gotcha. I was very quiet. I was very quiet.
I would be disappointed.
Very quiet. See, they all got this idea about me.
He says he was quiet.
They're probably wrong.
He did the Call his mama.
A couple of people were waiting on to see. Kenya is a spokesperson too, so for that group. Oh, she's in the corner. Okay, why don't we go ahead and reconvene then? So I hope everybody had a good discussion. I was able to roam from group to group, and I thought there was at least my perspective was there was a very rich discussion on all the topics in every group. And we're going to now take 15 or 20 minutes to debrief the groups. And each group has chosen a spokesperson. And we're going to start with Group C, which I think, Lewis, that's your group. If you could give a 5-minute debrief, and if you, okay. And if you need to wander to the corner to read your slides, that's fine.
She told me to wander to the corner, so I'm going to wander to the corner. Guys, we started talking about our aspirations, and we were really put our aspirations out there. And one was that the strong partnerships with non-traditional partners to provide the services I thought was huge, because we're trying to link our schools so that we're not isolated within our neighborhoods, within our county. Another was breaking that mold for public education, what it looks like. How do you break the mold? Those career choices, we sort of bogged down a bit talking about the options. The options, good options in all neighborhoods. Good options in all neighborhoods, and we talked about foundational options, where we began, as Mr. Boyd said, pre-K 3. You notice, Mr. Boyd, I said it really slow. Pre-K 3 available across the county where education begins. And then another powerful statement was all children are our children. I thought that was a very powerful statement. Our aspirations were huge, and we discussed them, and then we turned to our concerns. The major concern, as Mr. Cates talked earlier in committee meeting, was the instability concern. That teachers are going to be moving, kids are going to be moving, you're not going to go here, we're going to do these things in these buildings. That was a huge concern and barrier, and we've got to address that really quickly. And it was mentioned by our moderator that the communication plan would be sufficient to begin that process. Concern for adult stability versus student performance. And then we said that we're facing a reservoir of resentment and fear of the unknown. A reservoir of resentment and fear of the unknown. Those are huge as far as how we begin to address the issue of merging the two systems. We put all our concerns and barriers on the table, and here's the other one. We had a candid conversation about race. The perception of whose district and what district were our concerns and barriers. And then it was time for the vote. And Chairwoman Prescott doesn't quite get the 3 fingers. She kept asking for 4 votes. And, well, we don't have any witnesses to that. We're sort of the opinion that our numbers may not match our membership, BCG. I'm sorry. If you count the dots, you may find that she snuck a vote. But the one thing that was interesting was that our medium-term priorities, just look at the red dots. District structure that supports its schools and is responsive to, but here's the problem, the good thing, responsive to students and families. Under there, you see that strong neighborhood schools. And then we looked over to this side because we're really concerned about curriculum and programs, because the pre-K 3-12 idea, education begins at pre-K 3-12. We thought that was a tremendous opportunity, because here you'll find a STEM initiative, and Thomas Friedman says we're preparing children for jobs that we don't even know. Therefore, we need to be proactive and begin a process of equity and access to an opportunity for all of our marginal voices as well as our mainstream voices. So if all voices are on the table and we provide the curriculum and program that meets the students' needs in pre-K 3 through 12, we can address the issues of poverty, as Chair Pickler said. Poverty is our gorilla. We're actually fighting poverty, and it was interesting to see that our committee liked curricular programs and unique student needs. Another one, and I'll stop, the focus on quality teaching and strong school leadership. Our committee is committed to that part of it, and what we're most concerned about is that we don't miss that opportunity because we're at a great moment in time. If we don't seize this moment and have the conversations that we had in that corner tonight, Mr. Boyd put the race card on the table, and we discussed it. And we discussed it candidly and open. We cannot miss this as we stand at the precipice. And that's what that corner did over there. Was that the C group?
But that's divisible by 3.
Very well. I only took 3 votes, Lewis.
Okay, let's hear from the A group now.
I don't think we had any messing around with dot numbers here in our group. So. Okay, so I'm just going to try to add things that weren't already on the sheet and that Lewis didn't already mention. We talked a lot about a change in culture and expectations and motivation and hope, and we felt like this was an opportunity to not just change sort of the nuts and bolts of education, but also to sort of change the mindset, the perception of the importance of education throughout our community. We aspired to have the politics of education de-emphasized and the focus onto education itself as opposed to sort of, and I think maybe that is repetitive of focusing on the adults as opposed to the children. We did a lot of talking about not just pre-K, but pre-pre-K, and I think that overall we talked a lot about how important early childhood, not just within the schools, but within the families and within our communities in general, how critical that was. And we talked about ethical literacy and soft skills and how those kinds of things should play into the aspired outcome from this. Concerns, I think we had all the concerns that were on the sheet. There was a concern raised that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and don't want to blow it, to really seize this moment. Concern about a lack of control that we had over the process. This seems like we are in charge, but in essence we are not ultimately in charge, and I think that is a concern that was shared within our group. Priorities, we focused, there you can see a couple dots here on early childhood, and ours really were spread out again on curricular and programs that meet students' unique needs, teaching, and structure that supports all students. So, more to the center, huh?
We got some old eyes back here.
So you can see where our dots were. Just the right number.
Okay, and Group B?
So we're in the corner over here under our aspirations that hadn't been stated already. We talked about not just closing the achievement gap, but really looking at this as an opportunity for us to close the opportunity and access gap in addition to just the achievement gap. And then one of the key things that that many of our members talked about is really ensuring that district resources and dollars are appropriately provided and get to where they're needed. So all of the dollars are really going into the classroom and supporting our students. And really felt like improving the culture and morale of our whole system really has long-term implications for our children. And then lastly, in the culture piece, building a culture of high expectations for all teachers, students, parents, and our community. On concerns and barriers, I think all of them really go into fear for the unknown and uncertainty, but there was some discussion around new may not be better, and then also some fiscal questions around money for education not going to where students need, and then also there may not be enough money to provide the type of education that we want to provide, and then underlying issues around socioeconomic status, and then also class. On additional priorities, I think that this was reiterated by all groups, but that we're ensuring that every student has access to a quality education regardless of the neighborhood, wanting to ensure that under priorities that we also have positive partnerships with charter schools. We see them as a part of our long-term educational strategies that are addressing some of the underlying issues that cause our systems to struggle right now. And one of those issues was mobility, that we're coming up with some solutions on how we address that, and really using data to inform our priorities and development of a comprehensive performance management system. In this piece, both Ms. Cates and Chris Richards talked about how Charlotte Mecklenburg created a system where they were putting in a performance management for their superintendent. We're saying, how do we use that similar type process for a performance management system for our whole district? One piece that isn't on here, we talked about how FedEx has this purple promise, and how everyone believes in that their role and responsibility is to ensure that it's successful, and how we want to see that everyone who has interactions with students has that similar type of promise in their work. And everyone believes that our role and responsibility, regardless of if I'm a janitor, if I'm a secretary, it is really to support students, and we're wanting to build that type of culture. So a student-focused culture. On our DOT piece, as you see, majority of the dots went to looking at advancing curricula and programs that meet students' unique needs. We really highlighted this one and talked about how we want to ensure that we have expanded opportunities for AP courses and IB offerings. One of the pieces that we talked about was that in every school, regardless of the number of students who were there, that we were going to ensure that students had access to high-quality programs and also rigor. And in this piece, I wanted to highlight one of the things that we talked about was this isn't about saying that this is high quality access to what we currently have, that we're saying that we want to move above and beyond that and really show our community what a rigorous education could be. And then also on a district structure that supports schools and families and a focus on quality teaching and strong leaderships. And then the finance piece on identifying efficiencies and making sure the dollars go where our students are. Thank you.
We didn't have as many dots because one of our members left. I was told we put the dots
That's right. I could have brought my fourth dot over there.
Well, there was a lot of good discussion, and what I picked up as I went group to group is that the same key issues were bubbling up, and whether it was about aspirations or whether it was about concerns, or even if you look at the pattern of the dots on the priority charts, the primary issues that are on your mind are in common, right? And there are going to be some outliers, but I think it gives us a good opportunity to focus on really building a plan that meets your aspirations, that addresses your concerns, and deals with these priorities. And so this is a helpful exercise for us as we get introduced to the work that we're going to help y'all with. But but I thought it was a good and rich discussion. We're now going to, let me tell you what we're going to do with that. So we'll take all of the input from today and we'll adjust the wording of the aspirations, the concerns, and the priority slides to incorporate as best we can and call that I think from the reactions, this was probably a 75% of the way there as a starting position. You've added to it, and we'll move it to a 90% answer and call victory on that. We're now going to move to guiding principles. And the context for this is to provide a compass, a true north for the planning and as you approach your decision making. And so as I mentioned earlier, as the plan comes forward, you're going to have to judge it against something. And so this is the foil against which you will judge the plan and the recommendations. And so what we want to emphasize, though, is that we've drafted one of these, and we're going to get some comments from you tonight with your reactions to these. But these don't foreshadow a particular recommendation. These are just going to be used to gauge whether the recommendations are ultimately in keeping with these. And so we've informed this draft with our one-on-one interviews with each one of you. We also took the input from these conversations, and on the short break that we had, I had each of the facilitators come over and review the draft, and we made some edits to the guiding principles so that it was current as of even the conversations that you just had. And so we made some edits to it. And so we're going to go over this. The idea is to get your general comfort with it tonight, and then if we make a few edits to this, we'll then email that out, give you another chance to sleep on it and think about it, provide those comments back to us, and when we get back together in January, the idea is to try to reach consensus on a set of guiding principles in the January timeframe. So we're not locking this in stone tonight. This is just an opportunity for you to review it and provide input. This is hard to read, but we wanted. I'm going to go through it with you, and I think it's worth actually going through each of the items on it. The reason we couldn't make copies of it to pass it out is that we wanted to incorporate the feedback from the discussion tonight. But let me walk it through. So the first one is students first, that the success and well-being of students is our first and primary consideration. Next, we are all in this together. We believe that the quality of education anywhere in Shelby County impacts our entire region economically. Third, no change for change's sake. The consolidated district should aim to keep and build on what's already working in the city and county schools. Fourth, excellent neighborhood schools and options for all. All students should have an excellent school near their home to attend. Students should have the opportunities and options that meet their unique needs, either within their neighborhood school or elsewhere. Fifth, save where we can to fund what we need. Consolidation will present opportunities for savings. We must take advantage of these in order to invest in areas that support student success. Sixth, educators and staff are our most important asset. We desire a system where great teachers, principals, and staff want to work and are empowered to do their best. Accordingly, we do not advocate large-scale mandatory movement of teachers and administrators. And last, capture this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Success is not merely merging the two districts' operations. We have an opportunity to envision and create a world-class school system. Communicate the hope so that we can conquer the fears. So that's a start. It's meant to build on your voice, because this is what we synthesized from what we heard from you in the one-on-one discussions and what we heard from you tonight in the group discussions. But let me just, as you reflect, give you a second to reflect on it, and let's get any comments that we can capture about edits or additions or things that you think don't make sense up here. Yes?
I'm not seeing any mention of parents.
Okay, and what would you like to see up there?
We both in supporting the school and supporting the educational efforts of the teachers. And I mean, our philosophy has always been to have tremendous parent engagement makes all the difference in the world.
Can I? Okay, so we'll capture parent engagement as essential to the process. Yes.
So one piece on the parent engagement, it's not just their engagement in the process, it's their or engagement in education. They're also active participants in the decision making of their schools and what happens for their children. And so I just want us to capture that. In addition to that, so I think this is a great draft of guiding principles. My one concern is on the piece. I can't see what the educators and staff are our most important assets. I believe in framing should come from a positive standpoint and not just capturing negative. I think the piece about we don't advocate for large-scale mandatory movement of teachers and administrators doesn't capture, I know what some of the concerns are, but I think that that's too nebulous for us to have that as part of the guiding principle, because I think that we should want teachers to be in the place where they're needed, and that should be up to the administration to determine, and instead of us making an overarching piece around we don't believe that they should be moved. But that's just my feeling on that piece.
Okay.
The title, educators and staff are our most important asset. Our most important asset is kids, their education.
Yeah.
That's,
Maybe our most important resource.
Resource for educating the kids. Yeah. So, and we did hear from you. We did hear from you that obviously that kids are the most important in this, and that's why the first one, students first, was the overarching one. But we can make an adjustment from asset to resource on that.
To Kenya's point, and we'll just have a little. I definitely think educators and staff are our most important resource. That would be definitely a guiding principle, and the first bullet fits that. I really think the second bullet goes to another issue that we're all very acutely aware of and we're trying to address, and that's the stability issue of that fear of just moving for no good reason. So I know why it's up there, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be up there. I think we are wanting to address that so that we can get off of go, kind of like Staley said, but I'm not sure that really addresses that topic of educators and staff are our most important resource. Maybe we should just say it like we want to say it. I don't know.
But going to what Kendra said about a negative, why not make it a positive and talk about stability?
Right.
As opposed to that. But I think it's an important aspect. It's got to be addressed in there. And I think with large scale and mandatory, those are words that, address the concern, I think.
So does it really fit under this one? No change for change's sake. Is that stability is a key part of no change for no change's sake, or maybe even the title is stability matters, and that's the title, and no change for no change's sake, or for change's sake is a bullet underneath that. Do we need something specific? Because the intention and what we heard from many of you as a fear was that it was going to be like throwing the cards up in the air with the teachers, right? And that was a fear that people had. Now, we attempted to address that by saying no large-scale change, right? That didn't, and explicitly, there may be very good reasons to move some teachers, and some teachers may want the option to move, and that may be the right thing to do, to have that out there as a possibility. But the idea here was no large-scale change, and it wasn't throwing the cards up in the air.
Well,
so
maybe that should
how do we deal with that?
Maybe that bullet, if you have a stability as a large heading, that bullet you just said of no large change for change's sake and no large-scale mandatory movement. I mean, maybe that's.
Does that deal with your concern?
Tommy is saying stability in the teaching
Oh,
voice.
state it positively. Okay.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's presumptuous of us to. I'm sorry. I think that it's presumptuous of us to make the decision on or saying that large-scale mandatory movement may not be necessary. And so I don't think that I clearly understand what you're trying to articulate, but I think when we're thinking about students first, students may need there to be movement of teachers to be in the places where there has the greatest need. So if that is the case, then we have to do that. But I think that if we are trying to get to stability, then that's a different piece. And I just want us to say the stability piece.
I think we're overreaching there.
Overreaching on
that's too much. We're down to minute again, and that's not going to be an issue. We're the transition planning committee. As far as putting teachers where kids are, those decisions would not end up being in the hands of the superintendent or the administrative structure of the new system.
I have something on a different topic on the excellent neighborhood schools. I mentioned in our little breakout session our need to be aware of managing this neighborhood school phrase and what the expectations of that mean. Because we have several schools now that are underutilized. And if we start out with that, everybody who's got a school anywhere close to them is going to say, you can't close my school because you promised neighborhood schools. So we have to be sure everybody understands that it's a district, it's a school zoning area. I like the idea I like the phrase neighborhood schools, but I just think we've got to manage that carefully so we don't get unrealistic expectations where people are thinking, well, gosh, not only are they not going to close these, they're going to start building some in my neighborhood now.
Smoking like a mayor.
What about excellent local schools in options for all? It leaves out the neighborhood names, but it gets at proximity.
Let's say that in the mic.
Did you get that, Delano? Yep. Okay.
Can I?
Other Staley?
This is more of a question than a comment, but where we talk about excellent and success and well-being. We have some words up there that we would all agree with, but that they could be fuzzy or they could be kind of debated later. Should there be something about what is something about rigor, the improvement we all want, the academic achievement? Should there be anything that puts more of a measurable thing on that, or you know what I mean? I'm not sure.
How about high academic achievement?
At a minimum, and whether we say we can measure it or every kid needs to have relative gains, whether it's from the worst school getting better to the best school still under pressure to get even better. I worry that we're leaving that out a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things that Charlotte Mecklenburg talked about the other night was, they used some interesting wording, but they said that they had moved from being concerned so much about access or equity to our students achieving. What are the results? And so I think that, when we talk about students first, it scares me that we've got some guiding principles that don't say that we are reaching for high academic achievement of all students, because however we organize or look at the curriculum or any of those things, that seems to be what we're supposed to be doing, is wanting to, and we're not going to be a world-class school district unless our children are achieving high. We can say what we're doing, every day till next year, but if the kids are not doing well, we're not going to be considered a world-class district.
So there's something specifically about high levels of student achievement and
so.
measurable high levels of student achievement.
Yes.
Yep.
Good question.
Okay. Other comments?
I'm not sure we dealt.
Dr. Green?
I'm not sure we dealt with Kenya's concern. We just kind of left it hanging. And I agree with Lewis that some decisions should be left to the new administration, but I think we also have to state a position, and where I'm coming from in that concern is that going philosophically, that students need the best teachers that we have to offer them, and some kind of way to capture that.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, go ahead.
I certainly think that every child in Memphis and Shelby County ought to have the best teacher possible. But I also know that I'm speaking as a teacher, we have a lot of teachers out there who are very, very terrified that they are going to be taken from their school that they have given 25, 30, 40 years to, and for no reason other than because they have been successful, they're going to be moved to somewhere that they've never been before. And that is a real serious concern, and I think we should address it in some way. Obviously, I don't want to tie anybody's hands that you can't, make the appropriate decisions on how you move teachers and everything. But I do think it needs to be addressed in some way that teachers and administrators are not just going to be moved.
Yeah. Can you?
And we heard from Charlotte Mecklenburg that the way they did it was it became a real positive to be chosen to go to a high priority school. And that then somebody is asked to do it and they're very happy to do it, rather than somebody coming in and saying, okay, you're a good teacher, so we need you in this school over here. And I think we're going to have very, very low morale and very unhappy teachers if they don't see from the very beginning that there is an effort to maintain the stability of the students and the teacher's placement.
Right. Can you?
There's a comment before me,
okay.
And then I'll go.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I would suggest that what Katie said, her very first statement, can become the guiding principle, simply that we want all of our students to have access to the best teacher possible. And you don't have to say whether they get moved for that to happen. Movement is not part of what we state. Whether we're for movement or against movement, we simply want all of our students to have access to the best teachers possible.
So let me ask a question. I mean, I think I've heard stability put forward as something that matters, and I've heard people say that all students need to have access to the best teacher available, the best teacher possible. The question, if you had those two both up here as guiding principles, does that allay the fears, right, that are out there in the minds of teachers around arbitrary movement? Not movement that's based on their choice or movement that's based on the interest of students, but around arbitrary movement. And so if it doesn't, I'm seeing some head shaking. So I'm assuming that at least for some of you, you'd say adopting that just doesn't go quite far enough. The question is, what do you want to have as a principle around this in order to address that? Kenya, did you have a comment on that?
I just ask us to rise up to what we believe guiding principles should be. And while this may be a concern that we need to address in the process, I don't believe it rises up to what our North Star or the guiding principles of our work should be.
Please explain.
Of what I'm saying? Because I believe that this is minutia. So I believe that we're getting into, some of the micro of it, of the issue of staffing and planning. Yes. And so I believe that we could just rise up a little bit and get to what is the overarching vision that we want to have, and then leave that comment off completely.
Okay. Barbara?
Yeah, I'd like to just make one comment, and I absolutely think that, first of all, the guiding principle of just high academic achievement is very important, as well as teachers, educators, and staff being our greatest asset, and that every student needs to have a strong teacher. I'm sorry. So yeah, give it to you. All right. Anyway,
they're too close together.
And I really understand what Kenya is saying, because on the one hand we're looking at what is our aspiration, what do we want it to be, and I also believe, having been a school board member, David, you do too, that there are decisions that are left to principals, but principals not as principals, but principals as in PAL. But our job is also to come up with a plan that can effectively and efficiently merge these districts. And there could be some things that if we don't address them, they're not going to merge. They're just going to be, it's just going to be kind of what it is, but it's going to look a little different. And so I would never, and I don't think anybody that knows me would ever think that I would want for students to not have the very best. But I think we have to address that stability issue somehow in this. And I think even with Charlotte Mecklenburg, I mean, I love the fact that that superintendent was able to get the very best principals to go into low-performing schools. But they'd also been merged for 50 years, and he had people in the wings to come in. So I mean, it is kind of out of our area. I mean, I know exactly what Kenya's talking about in terms of assignments are absolutely superintendents. And that kind of philosophy about trying to get your very best into your low-performing schools, those are superintendent's issues. But as a merger team, we do have some responsibility to try to fashion a merger that will have the best opportunity for it to be merged. And I think that if we don't address somehow those particular fears without tying the hands of superintendents. I mean, that's tricky. I don't know how to do it. Maybe y'all can take these ideas off and come bring us something back in January that we can look at, because I don't want to tie the hands, and I don't want to give students short shrift. I want them to have the very best teachers, but I also want to have a chance that these teachers that are scared to death will stay in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the merged district.
You asked a question earlier as to whether putting the term stability up there would in and of itself allay the fears. No, it won't. But I think the failure to put stability up there could compound the fears that are out there.
Okay. So, I mean, I think, and we've picked up stability as one of the comments. We've picked up, let me go back over the comments that we've added to this, which are parent engagement, and treating them as important decision makers in the process. That education and staff are our most important resource. Change the word asset. That stability matters is important up there. Excellent local schools. Use the word local instead of neighborhood, and high academic achievement with some rigor or measurement aspect to that. So we'll incorporate those comments. There's also a comment that there's something up here that some people feel like stretches a little too far, right? Which is, and may bind the hands or move into the hands of management, and that's the issue or the statement around large-scale teacher mobility. So those are the comments we have so far. Yes.
I'd like to add an outcome statement of some sort.
Okay.
Whether we want to do this or not. It relates to what Staley was saying. I mean, why do you have a school? Ultimately, you need to produce students who are going to be good citizens. So what is your outcome statement at that point in time? College readiness and or career readiness, or some statement. It relates to what Staley was asking before, but I think it takes you to the sort of the end product. Now, I don't think we've got any end product there. We sort of got a lot of internal statements, but at the end of where are we with this project?
Sure. So that it's aiming for college and career readiness for kids. I mean, that's a measure of academic achievement and of preparedness for life. Yeah, sure. Can you?
I just want to add just another adjective to the neighborhood schools of looking at potentially community schools. So instead of the neighborhood, so local, like using that as a descriptor.
Using the word community instead of the word neighborhood? Or local. Reactions to that?
I like it.
Community, okay.
What do you think, Mayor?
Okay, good. All right, any other comments on this? I mean, how do y'all feel about this in general? I mean, do you think generally it captures the feeling that you have around what your guiding principles should be?
Call me back about 9 o'clock on the 10th, and then three of us will give you an answer on that. Because we'll be the ones on the stage, and we'll be the ones that either have a lot of happy people or we'll need some nets to catch the tomatoes.
Yeah. No, and I clearly there's a requirement for transparent communication and making people understand where you're going with this thing. And if there are a lot of tomatoes, then your next meeting, I guess we're going to have a discussion about it, right?
Well,
So
we're anticipating at that meeting probably somewhere around 150 to 200 teachers and staff, just at that one meeting, a part of the crowd. And so that is going to be an issue that's going to come up. And it's going to be a lot easier for us to address it there rather than a month later trying to undo it. And it doesn't do us any good to give them the answer principals are going to deal with this in the future, and it never gets to the principals because we never can have them on board.
Yeah, I just have a concern that and we kind of gotten down in the weeds on this stability issue, and I agree with you completely. We're in the weeds. Look, if people are asking based on what they know today about their separate school district, what their job assignment's going to be in the future, that's a question we can't answer.
No, that's true.
Okay.
We don't know that today, even if the district stays the same.
Right.
There you go. So, I mean, there's a certain part of me that says we've just gotten too far down in the weeds on this. I don't think there's anybody here who is in favor of change for change's sake, but I can tell you right now, we will not succeed if on the front end we tie our collective hands by trying to make commitments to people who are looking at the world the way it is today.
That's true.
Okay. Any other last comments, or you want to end on that one?
Let me
Kenya?
ask.
That's a good statement. I just want to make sure Staley's comment around using some data metric or some metric is included, because I don't see.
It's up there.
I'm sorry.
Well, there were two ways that we wanted to capture that. One was around a measurable way of looking at student achievement, and then the other one was capturing some notion of preparing kids for college and workforce career readiness. Those were the two ways. And so, we'll work with that. But would that deal with your concern if we incorporate that kind of language?
That's fine. I'm sorry, I just didn't see it captured,
Okay.
so I just wanted to make sure that.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Jay, let me ask you a question. Is the process now for you to take these and on the few things that we had some conversation on, do some wording that tries to capture what you're hearing? I mean, if they're mostly good, and then bring them back so we can look at those and adopt them on on our first meeting in January.
Yes, and we're going to do that with all the categories that we talked about, the aspirations, the concerns, the priorities, but also the guiding principles. And the guiding principles are really the primary output that we're aiming for here, but we want to make sure that we've captured all of that. And so what we're going to do is incorporate those edits, and we'll email those back out. We'll allow people to then make any last comments to those so that we can get one more round of incorporation. But hopefully we've heard most of your comments tonight. So I think it would be a better process if you have material comments that you make those tonight rather than try to incorporate those in your email comments. Right. But then we'll get the email comments back, make one final set of edits to it, and then we'll come prepared to the next meeting for you to adopt those. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Jim?
I just really want to ask the members of the commission to make sure you take your homework. Mr. Padgett?
Yes, sir.
And get it back to us, please. We really do need this to begin the planning that we need to do for community engagement. We need your contact list.
On that front, we promised, Nico, we were talking about circling back. On the legal requirements 5 and 6, just listing the legal requirements of the teachers, keeping pension rights and salary schedule and all that. So we said as we leave here, somebody will be in charge of posting that on hopefully multiple websites. But again, that is not any editorializing. It's just showing teachers, don't be scared of this.
That's right.
Yeah, good.
Mhm.
Yep. Yes.
The one question I have is about including some language about just a high-quality leader, like a high-quality superintendent, in this process. Because we have a lot talking about great teachers, principals, and staff. I just think that that designation is critical to alleviate some of the additional community fears. So if we could add that in some piece in there.
If we change the word staff to leaders, would that do it? Or do you want to specifically use the word superintendent?
I think the school board would chafe a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're hiring the superintendent.
Yeah, if we do that, then
Which we're not going to be doing.
we don't need to do that. We need to stay away from that.
I agree with the principal. I'm just saying we have fun. But if we, how do we address that without, we can't stand for a guiding principle of superintendent hiring because we're not going to be the ones to do it.
And for me, it wasn't about superintendent hiring. It was more so about creating a culture where we're going to inspire high quality, have staff that is going to be focused on student success. But I'm fine with if you won't feel like that, since I fall so much on the other one.
We'll let you give on that.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? All right. The part that we had for the meeting, we're done,
Well, you
Madam
did
Chairman.
You did a good job. You got done on time. The only thing is that we will, some of you are having committee meetings. You're continuing to have some committee meetings. A couple of just things about that. Be sure if you're having a meeting, it would be very helpful if you also notify Diane Brown, because she is, sometimes people will write her and say, when are the meetings? And if you are a chair sending out your notices, please also copy her at any time that you're doing that. And don't forget that we have to have minutes and roll. And the other thing about that, and I think I mentioned that to some of the chairs, that if you are planning the next meeting and you don't, and there are people that are not there, they're not knowing that until later on, closer to the meeting, they're getting a notice. So we've got to get a system whereby if you're planning your next meeting date on the date that you're meeting, then we immediately notify the other members. Now, what we're going to be working on, Diane and I are working on this, and we're talking to Dr. Smarelli. We're trying to get some additional help administratively so that we can have people in the meetings taking notes that can do just that. But until we do that, our resources are slim, but we're working on some possibilities. Please, Chairman, be sure and do your role, take your notes and minutes, and if you are scheduling another meeting, be sure that that notice immediately goes out to the membership of your committee. Okay? All right, and other than that, our first meeting will be the first Thursday in January. So y'all have a good holiday. All right, good deal. And thank you, Boston. You all did a great job tonight. We got way down the line. Very good.